morning, Southern Illinois. You are listening to Isn't It Queer on WDBX 91.1 Community Radio serving the Southern Illinois region. This is Jonny recording the show live on a Tuesday afternoon before it goes out on a Wednesday morning. Well, this is a week where Heather is away at a conference of her own, and I am coming back with some danger on my way back from a retreat that I just did in Missouri for the last 10 days. It is an opportunity to share the sort of challenges of coming back to doing a radio show after taking a little bit of a time off from it, as well as coming back to the news stories that shock us. In the front half of the show, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I went through at the retreat, especially at the end, given the flooding that was happening in Missouri at the end of last week. I'm then going to turn to the news that struck my eyes as I got off of a 10-day silent meditation retreat, including news of Grams, one dropping out of a race and one dropping out of life, as well as the allegations that are made against someone like Pete Buttigieg and the ways in which agencies are sometimes weaponized against LGBTQ couples, especially if they dare to be political candidates. In the back half of the show, Heather has recorded an interview with local activist Carrie Vine, updating us a bit on how Carrie is doing and how she has overcome some particular health challenges that she faced, as well as her new position with Equality Illinois. It is a thick show, and I think we should dive right in. Well, friends, this is certainly turning out to be one of the more bizarre and challenging summers, and I'm exhausted by it. I'm going to be talking about it today, at least for the first half of the show, on my own, before turning it over to a wonderful interview that Heather has done. Heather, of course, is not with us because she is at a writers' conference in Chicago. I hope everything's going well up there. I'm sure that it is. Absolutely sure that it is. Of course, this is that thing that happens, especially in the summer quite a bit, is we have other opportunities, things that we go to, things that we do, and sometimes that impacts our recording schedule. Well, this week I'm doing this without Heather and did not manage to arrange for somebody else to sit in with me, sorry, partly because I was out of town. I knew that I would be getting back in town late because I was out at a meditation retreat, a 10-day silent meditation retreat at the Damasuka Meditation Center out in Missouri, sort of in between Ironton and Annapolis in sort of south-central eastern Missouri. It's about a not quite 3-hour drive from here in Carbondale to there. It's a good time. This was, I think, my 5th retreat with them. I've been doing them pretty regularly, and they practice tranquil wisdom, insight meditation. Here's what happened with that particular trip, though, is if you're paying attention to where I just told you the Damasuka Meditation Center is, then you know that it's near, the Black River, Tomsock Park, the Johnson Shut-ins, all of which are in that portion of Missouri that on last Thursday night were hit by a once in 1,000 years kind of storm. It wasn't, when I was in the middle of it, I thought, is this a hurricane? Is this a tropical storm remnant that's hitting us here? I have been at the Damasuka Meditation Center when a tropical storm remnant hit the retreat center, and it was quite daunting. But we'd gotten no warning. We hadn't heard anything, at least those of us that were meditating and had turned our phones in and were not really connecting to the rest of the world as we did the work of a silent meditation retreat. But on Thursday night, at about 10:30 or so, it started thunderstorming, just a regular thunderstorm, and it started pouring rain. And the thing is, it didn't stop. It just kept pouring rain. It was one of those storms where it's constantly lightning. It's never just the flash of lightning. It's a constant flicker and constant thunder and constant rain. The wind wasn't so bad, but the rain was intense. And it was a lot of it through the night. It wasn't storm after storm after storm. It was constant storm. I understand that on the radar, if you looked at it, we just happened to be in a line of storms rather than the lines moving sort of horizontally and you crossing the line if you were in an area. We happened to be in that place that was on the line and just got hit for hours and hours and hours. I have seen 9+ inches overnight. I have also seen someplace else say that it was closer to 12 inches in some sections, and I would not be surprised if where we were it wasn't more like 12 inches of rain overnight. Now, on the facility grounds, there are usually at this time of year dry creek beds. Like a lot of creeks here in southern Illinois, many of the creeks in Missouri and in the Ozarks are seasonal. They are impacted by the rain. They really only flow when there's a fair amount of rain. There are some that are more sustainably fed by groundwater and springs and so forth, and those exist too. But at least the ones on this property were not that. Well, this particular time, the creek rose about 7 feet. Now, here's the thing. The way that the Damasuka Meditation Retreat Center is set up, they had a section that was already sort of developed that was down by the creek, and then the other section that they developed, that's more the meditation center that's up on the bluff line, just a little bit above the creek, up the hill. The monastics, the teachers of the meditation retreats, the monks who may be staying there, are down in the lower portion. The people who are retreating are in one-person cabins, very small, very efficient, up at the top of the hill. So we had rain, we had thunder, we saw water forming. We did not have a creek flow into where our cabins were, which is what happened down in the monastic section. And the water rose, and it rose to the doors, and then rose high and ultimately to the top of the door frame. Delson Armstrong, who was our instructor at the time, was staying in one of the larger cabins that was down there. And at about 3 a.m, he was instructed to get up into the loft and get away from the water that was coming into the place where he was staying. Bhante Kusala, who was a monk visiting, ready to be there as part of a ceremony that was going to happen that weekend, was in a smaller cabin and realizing the danger that he was in, got out when he saw the flash flood happening at like 3 a.m. and climbed a tree and managed to stay and hold on to the tree, but not easily, through much of the night. The last that anybody heard from Bhante Kusala and his phone access was at 3:30 a.m. Now, I got up bright and early, about 5 a.m, and discovered what was going on here, and that's about right for when we wake up on a retreat anyway. They had heard some from Delson, but Delson also got sort of cut off there at the end. We went down and we could not get to where they were because the bulk of the water was between us and them, washing out the bridge between us and the main road, which is a tiny road, and it was scary. 911 wasn't always taking phone calls because there were a lot of people dealing with this at the time. We did eventually see from across what had become almost a river, rescue teams show up, and we did get to see that Delson Armstrong and Bhante Kusala were saved. They were injured, and they were going to have to walk in their injured state about a mile down the road to where the ambulance could get in this weather. But they were with us, and we were relieved. And then after that, we started to put together, as the rain finally stopped and the water started to recede, were we going to be able to get out of the retreat center? One of the people that was at the retreat center, who was driving a 4-wheel drive truck, actually went down and looked at the bridge and came back and talked to us and said, you know what, I think we could probably, if we work together, fill in that gap with the rocks that are all around and make something that a good truck like mine could get across, and then I can take care of getting several people out of here. And then other people would have access, at least by foot, to get luggage and whatnot out to the main road, and they could be picked up, which was the other plan. Some folks coming down from St. Louis to pick them up so that they could make their flights. We did that. The Sangha, the community of people who had been meditating, got together, and after noble silence was broken and we were talking to each other, we worked together and we filled in that gap. And while we were doing it, somebody drove by and saw what we were doing and came down and gave us good advice on how to do it, and then told the retreat center director, I have a backhauler and some rocks. I could come and try to fix your roads. And the retreat director was like, and I will pay you if you do. And so they made an arrangement, and sure enough, by the time the car that was coming down to get me on Friday afternoon, me and a friend, we were able to ride in a small car down all the way to the road, and probably people who had their cars there could get out. The community came together, worked together at the Meditation Retreat Center, and then other parts of the community saw us come together and stepped in to help. And that was a really interesting lesson to me, because we say a lot of times on the show that when you're struggling with something big that seems out huge and big and national or international and seems out of your ability to have any influence or control over, that you lean into your community and you work with your community, because it's how your community survives those issues that you don't have control over is by mutual support. And here was a really good example of that. Of course, a community of meditators, usually monastic meditators, is called a Sangha. And we take on the name and call taking refuge in the Sangha when we're at a meditation retreat. And here this community came together and worked together to provide for its own rescue, its own getting out of what had become a sealed-off space. We were able to get out. Delson Armstrong and Bhante Kusala are doing much better and will be running retreats later in the summer. The retreat center is still open and will be doing its retreats for the rest of the summer. It has taken serious damage. The monastic area is completely washed away and destroyed. They will probably rebuild something like it, but not on the floodplain this time. By the way, they inherited that developed spot and they just had enhanced it over the years, and they had had some flooding in the past, but every way that they had enhanced it had been able to stand up to the flooding. This was an unprecedentedly high flood. It impacted so much of that area and that region. And if you weren't following the news, maybe you saw down here in Carbondale, if you're local, on Friday night we had some rain and some flooding here, and people were kayaking on Main Street, and it looked pretty bad. And there was a while there on Saturday, I understand, that it took a little minute to get through town because the main intersections were closed due to flooding and flood damage, but they got them back open pretty quickly. It was so many times worse in that part of Missouri. So coming back from that, I find myself on a radio show, putting it together without my co-host because she's off doing her own conference and probably doing it quite well. And I'm happy to be here. She managed while I was gone to get an interview with local activist Carrie Vine, who is now a member of Equality Illinois and on the board of Equality Illinois. We're going to check in with Carrie in the back half of the show because she's been through some challenges of her own and come through on the other side and is back to being an incredible advocate. Not that she ever really stopped, but some of the medical challenges that she was dealing with dampened her abilities to be quite the advocate that she was for the LGBTQ community down here. She's back on board, and she has things to tell us about the work that she's doing and some events that are coming up that I think matter. Of course, the other thing that always happens when I come back from a silent meditation retreat is that I get to check out the news. I try to avoid it for a while because you need to ease back in. But when you're easing back in through a flash flood that destroyed portions of the place where you were, you kind of want to check the news to see how it's being covered, and you can't avoid running into other stories. And some of the stories, y'all. First of all, let's talk about the grams. The grams, yes, I mean more than 1 gram. One of the stories hadn't quite happened until I was fresh out, and then it happened right away, and oh my God. And the other story had happened while I was gone, and to come out of a retreat and hear that that's happening is, a bit much. So the first story, the one that I heard about when I got out of the retreat, was Graham Plattner withdrawing from the run for Senate in Maine against Susan Collins. Now, Plattner was always a iffy candidate. And he had several things that kind of caused scandal or concern for him. And, of course, one of the overriding narratives that had come with somebody who was a very left-leaning, worker-oriented, progressive thinker was that he had been through some challenges, including some veteran PTSD experiences that had made some of his behaviors a decade or so ago not so politically viable, if you will. And then while we were in retreat, apparently somebody came out and talked about having sexual assault experiences with him a mere 5 years ago. Now, Plattner denies these ever happened, but the evidence was a little too credible, and on top of a lot of other evidence has made him have to withdraw from running for office, which is sad because he was actually polling pretty well against Collins. Let's be clear, I think a molded piece of cheese right now could run better than Collins in Maine, and maybe we'll find out if that's true going forward. But the person who won the Democratic primary now has had to withdraw because he was an iffy, if you will, candidate. And let's be clear here. While the news is damning, And I don't ever want to question somebody's reports of I was sexually assaulted, especially at this particular time when one party seems so willing to cover up evidence of sexual assault, especially in politicians, especially in somebody who is the president. I think the Democratic Party is quick to actually tell its own, no, not at all, not even a suggestion, you got to go. But let's also recognize that there is a divide happening in the Democratic Party right now between its more mainstream liberals, if you will, its more mainstream Democrats, more centrist Democrats, the compromisers, the ones who think we should play it easy and be careful and not ask for too much, and the more progressive, leftward-leaning Democratic Socialist wing of the party that is a little bit more in line with what Graham Plattner was offering. So it seems that those two things may have come together to make his run for the Senate no longer viable. And while I think there's something a little bit sketchy about what's making him withdraw, these are, I believe, some legitimate concerns and some things that we need to be careful about. At the same time, I can't help but note that this seems to be a pushback, if you will, against what seems to be primaries that are increasingly selecting folks much more liberal, much more progressive in their stances. I also want to leave open possibilities because I think in our cancel culture atmosphere today, we tend to try and hold people accountable for things that happened a long time ago that hopefully they've moved beyond. We want to hold open the possibilities. I hope that people can change, that people can get better, that people can renounce things that they used to be and say that they've learned lessons. At the same time, sometimes I think we're quick to hold people accountable for things that maybe we're quick to jump to conclusions about. Take, for example, somebody like Hudson Williams, who plays Shane Hollander in Heated Rivalry. What, you think I wasn't going to have a Heated Rivalry reference in here while I got a show to myself? Wrong. Hudson Williams, of course, has been under a certain amount of internet backlash because of some pictures of him when he was a teenager, covered in, not tattoos this time, but marks on his face and elsewhere, including, I think at one point, a swastika, and questions about why that would happen and what would happen. Of course, his own narrative about it, and if you look at the pictures closely, it doesn't look like he drew that thing that's on his face. It looks like it might be somebody creating a scandalous picture, if you will, back before the man was even in any way famous for his acting career or doing performances. And he's had to respond. Like, for example, Peloton removed him from all of their advertising, all of their images because of those images of him when he was 19. Now, people have pushed back against Peloton, importantly, productively, reminding them, hey, why would you do this? This is something that happened when he was young. He doesn't hold those views. He didn't hold those views then, really. He tells it as a kind of a pranking story. And the things that we do in our teenage years that may get caught on social media and then come back and haunt us later is pretty brutal. Is that what's happening with Graham Plattner? I don't know. 5 years ago doesn't seem that long ago. And he's been through some challenges. Maybe he isn't the most solid political candidate. But at the same time, he does seem to represent a working class voice and presence that may not always have the most politically savvy background, that has many things to bring to what I think we're trying to do in this country, and that would be powerful. Of course, the other Graham that happened while I was not away, when I got back, was Lindsey Graham. Now, Lindsey Graham, Lady Graham, as I like to call him, passed rather suddenly from what appears to be a heart problem after traveling. So maybe the traveling caused the heart problem. There's some questions about what was the cause, but again, who knows? I don't have the speculation here. Of course, we would know Lindsey Graham here as being a solid Trump supporter now, or then, as the case is, but not always. He used to question Trump until he didn't, until politically he recognized that he needed to be in bed with Trump. Lindsey Graham died single, lived single his entire life, and there were always reports that he had clandestine relationships with people of the same sex. Several sex workers have come out with stories about meeting with Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham had a secret. And look, no judgment. Okay, there's a little bit of judgment. Okay, there's a lot of judgment because, come on, Lindsey Graham was not a friend of Dorothy. Lindsey Graham voted against LGBTQ rights whenever he could. For example, in 1996, Lindsey Graham voted for the Defense of Marriage Act, which meant states were allowed to decline to recognize same-sex marriages performed elsewhere. It defined marriages between one man and one woman. He would go on to support a proposed amendment to the Constitution to define marriages between a man and a woman, arguing judges should not be allowed to change the definition. In 2015, when marriage equality was established across the country after Obergefell v. Hodges, he made it clear that he opposed it, but would accept the decision despite believing states should be allowed to decide their own marriage laws. He said at the time, "I'm a proud defender of traditional marriage." Then, in 2022, he voted against the Respect for Marriage Act, which repealed the previous Defense of Marriage Act to allow interstate recognition of legal same-sex and interracial marriages. Of course, also in 2010, he voted against the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And then in 2015, he voted against the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which would have stopped sexual orientation of gender identity-based discrimination in the workplace. So like I say, he's no friend of Dorothy. He has regularly spoken out and taken as his conservative stance positions against LGBTQ people, even as he has been accused within his own party by other Republicans, even as others have stepped up, even as there are rumors about his nickname, which has something to do with ladybugs, and I will let you look that one up yourself, that he was part of at least the shadow aspects of the LGBTQ community, even if he would never admit it and even if he denied it in public. But the suspicions of his sexuality and the secrets that he was keeping there plagued his career, even as he stepped in and, well, joined the party line against LGBTQ people. Two stories about Grahams, two stories about sexual encounters and past histories and things that we know about and things that we don't know about. And yeah, one we're told now makes him politically unviable, while the other made for a very powerful politician, keeping his secrets not exactly hidden, but just taking a position that would allow certain people to support him as he protested too much. Those were the Grahams. The interesting news about Graham Plattner, of course, is that as he has withdrawn, Jordan Wood has become a viable potential candidate to take over in the run for the Senate there. Jordan Wood, who is an out gay politician in Maine. Now, there are plenty of Mainers and speculators about Maine politics who hold that a gay man has no chance in heck of winning an election, and maybe that's too big of a risk. At the same time, though, he's polling pretty well, especially against Susan Collins, and maybe he could be the candidate. Wouldn't that be an interesting turn on that event? Another politician that I think is in the news, and I had heard this story right before I left and then seen some of the developments since I've been back while I was gone that caught me off guard, that concerned me, and that is Pete Buttigieg. Now, before I went away, it was actually a story we might have covered, but we were busy doing some other things right before I had to go off on retreat. Pete and Chasen were victims of a particularly pernicious turn on what we might call swatting. If you know swatting is when people call in SWAT teams on others with made-up hoax allegations of danger and cause unaccountable harm to somebody when SWAT shows up at your doorstep because you've been reported for some horrible crime. Now, they weren't swatted in the traditional way. It wasn't a SWAT team that was called in on Pete Buttigieg and Chasen. It was Child Protective Services. Pete Buttigieg writes, "I showed them in, invited them on the deck so that we could hear each other over the barking dog and asked what was going on. They explained that there had been an allegation against me, that it concerned our 4-year-old twins, and that a forensic interview had been arranged for the children the following day. I could not be present at the children's interview, nor could any family member sit in. Afterwards, they would come back and interview me, and only then would they tell me anything about the nature of the allegation." So imagine this. An allegation is made against a gay couple and their kids. a politician who has a public profile, who is a viable potential candidate for presidential run in the next election cycle. Child Protective Services is called in, and their kids, their 4-year-old twins, have to be taken away from the family and interviewed. In other words, there are allegations of trauma that these children are experiencing in a same-sex couple family. So we're going to take them away from their family and subject them to another kind of trauma of forensic investigation, interrogation, and discussion away from their fathers. Iffy, right? An anonymous caller, had contacted Child Protective Services. The caller said that he had spoken to a woman who had claimed to have met Pete Buttigieg at a conference several years ago in Alabama, where she said Pete told her that he had committed unspeakable violent crimes, and the caller believed Pete Buttigieg's children were still at risk. That was all. I mean, obviously they had some questions. He asked if Pete had ever been to the town where the woman claimed she had met Pete, and Pete was able to say he hadn't. Then the officer made clear that he believed this was politically motivated and said it would not be referred to a prosecutor. Nothing in the forensic interview with the children, which was conducted by trained personnel, had led to concerns. There is a great Substack article by Pete Buttigieg that talks more about this, and I highly recommend it. We flipped in a story by Dara Gordon, the CEO of Family Equality, who is very concerned about this political action against a political figure using Child Protective Services and using the doubts that an administration and its agencies may have for same-sex couples. This was during Pride Month, y'all. This was a deliberate attack on a political opponent during Pride Month, charging him with things that could not actually be verified, and yet required for 24 hours taking his kids away from him and away from his partner, Chasten, and interrogating them. I'm sure kindly, I'm sure not brutally, but at the same time, not without a certain amount of trauma that would come with that. Keeping their fathers away from them while they did the investigation, while they acknowledged that they had no corroborating evidence, while they acknowledged there was nothing in the children's testimony that supported any of the allegations against Mr. Buttigieg. As Dara Gordon notes, even when the system works, one anonymous lie blew up Buttigieg's family's lives for 24 hours. LGBTQ plus parents carry this worry, plus a system that can shut them out in 16 states, even without a lawful allegation. In those 16 states, state-licensed child welfare agencies are legally permitted to turn away LGBTQ plus families on religious beliefs. And a third of LGBTQ plus parents say that they don't have the same legal protections as other families. When a system can both exclude families on the front end and be weaponized against them on the back end, calling what the Buttigieg family experienced a rare occurrence isn't much comfort. It just means that the next family won't have a famous name attached to make the headlines. Politicians, queer or not, facing allegations and the challenges of allegations is what I came out of the retreat dealing with. The secrets of a Lindsey Graham, the past of a Graham Plattner, and the made-up charges against a Pete Buttigieg. They're not the same exactly. I actually show the variety of differences that we face in the current climate, and it's a hard time right now. It's a hard time right now to be doing this kind of community work. And in the back half of the show, I think we want to hear from somebody who's been doing this kind of community work, even as she faced serious challenges to her health and ability to do this work. And we are lucky to have her doing this particular work. I'm going to let Heather take over and interview Carrie Vine in the back half of the show. And then I'll come back to close us out with a little bit of information about the event that Carrie is talking about. You are listening to Isn't It Queer on WDBX FM 91.1, community radio serving the southern Illinois region. We're going to take a quick minute to listen to one of the station's underwriters, and then we'll be right back with Heather's interview with Carrie Vine.
Support for community radio on WDBX comes from the Carbondale Times newspaper, serving the community with news, sports, entertainment, and all things Carbondale since 1997. Pick up a copy of the Times each Friday for civic news, information on who's playing the Strip this weekend, an extensive list of upcoming community events, and all the latest on Carbondale Terrier and Saluki athletics. Best of all, it's free. And to keep up with the Times anytime, visit us online at carbondaletimes.com or look us up on Facebook. Want even more information? Give us a call at 549-2799. Thanks for reading, and remember, together we are Carbondale.
Hello, and welcome back to the show, Carrie Vine, who's always popular.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, you've been on here talking about a number of things because you're really busy in our community, doing a whole mess of stuff. You used to be in charge of Rainbow Cafe, and then health concerns forced you to drop out of the position, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that is correct. That is pretty much how things happened. And I had to take kind of about a year off from doing any kind of major organizing or anything.
Yeah, and at the time it felt like a real blow to the community because you really energize whatever group you're with. If I remember right, it was a tumor?
Yes, I had a brain tumor. I was diagnosed with in October. So I had surgery to remove it in January of 25. And I found out like a lot of like my health issues I was having, like major headaches and vertigo, and even like things personality wise and, impulse control and things like that was all impacted because it was in my frontal lobe, which that was kind of the center that controls all of that. So, yeah. So, and it grew quite a bit from my October MRI when I had to my January MRI, it grew 50%. So they were a little concerned about it being malignant and having cancer. And so like there was even discussion about that. But thankfully, after they did the craniotomy and got the tumor out and everything, it was benign. So that was a good news. I didn't have to undergo any radiation or chemo or anything. However, it was still challenging because I had what they call idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Essentially, I had too much brain fluid and CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, in my head that was causing just a lot of extra pressure. So my skull never would heal, and I would just be leaking cerebral spinal fluid constantly. And this went on for a long time, much longer than what it should have. And it would like gather a big like fluid filled bubble and then it'd pop or something like that. So finally in July, after my surgery in January, finally in July I had another surgery, and they put in what they call a shunt that's behind my ear, and it basically releases the extra pressure and lets it drain down to the space around your stomach and stuff. Still wasn't out of the woods, still had major issues, still had lots of infection going on and things like that. They just couldn't figure out what to do. And then probably in about December, late November, early December, enough of my skin had eroded away that you could even see the hardware, the screws, the plates, and everything from the craniotomy. So went in again with another neurosurgeon because my neurosurgeon had moved. And they said they were going to just open everything up and fix it, take all the hardware out. And that was also including like an ENT plastic surgery specialist. And so that surgery happened on February 25th. So now we're going on a little bit over a year of surgery in and out of burns, all that good stuff. So that surgery happened on February 25th of 26 recently. And I went to sleep thinking they were just going to be taking out the hardware, essentially. And they got in there, and unfortunately, the bone flap from the craniotomy was moth-eaten, they called it in my medical records, which was really eaten. So it was like super holy and not viable bone at all. So they just took that piece of skull out and then closed me up. So I am still missing like a piece of skull, which a lot of people are concerned about and think, do I need to have like a plate or something else like that, which is totally an option. However, it's probably like a 2.5 inch hole. And so my risk is pretty low. I'm more at risk of getting infection from opening up and putting more hardware in, especially considering my reaction to the original hardware. So for now, I'm just kind of walking around. My neurosurgeon said he would not recommend that I go skydiving, was his solution. So I'm like, okay. So that's where I'm at now. I feel great. Still, working again a lot. Got through all that, and I feel better now than I have in probably 2 years at least. So,
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're
mhm.
feeling better. But
Thank
with
you.
all that hardware, I guess you could say, you could blame things on, oh, a screw must be loose.
Yes, absolutely. That was a good joke. Yes, because I was always like, yeah, the screw is up there. And everybody's like, oh, you have a screw loose. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, it's not loose because it's still in there and holding stuff in, but not an ideal situation.
And it
So
sounds like this second neurosurgeon did a pretty good job.
he did. And I mean, the first one did fine too. It was just kind of like my body was kind of rejecting things. And so I would go up to Barnes and I'd be like, I'm still leaking cerebral spinal fluid. We need to figure out what's going on. And I'd stay for like a day or two. They'd do a bunch of MRIs and a bunch of testing and stuff. And then they'd send me home. And I was kind of like, okay, not a whole lot you can do, because the theory behind that was if I had this stuff leaking out, things could actually get in too. And that would be like meningitis, severe meningitis. So,
Oh,
you
yeah, that would
know,
be terrible.
right. So I was definitely like super careful. I made sure like if I had any kind of fever symptoms or a stiff neck or anything, I went straight to Barnes, but I kind of let things ride to try to like let things heal themselves. And when the screw started sticking out of my scalp, and you could even tell that it needed a Phillips head, that was a note to myself that, okay, we're done with this. It needs to be fixed.
At least it got fixed better than the general handyman response of duct tape.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, so I'm doing okay now. Super excited to kind of like be back in life. My partner Kurt and I, we kind of like just took a year off, where we weren't really doing anything. He wasn't playing music and those kinds of things. And we were just doing kind of the bare minimum that we had to do because
Wasn't
things were a
playing
little
music?
scary. Huh?
Kurt wasn't playing music?
He was doing, yeah, right, Heather. He was doing some recording at home and like an occasional gig here and there, but definitely not what he
Okay, so
likes to do.
not
Hmm.
music out, just his
Correct.
usual music in. Okay.
Right. His usual recordings and fun stuff he does back in the music room, for a couple of hours sometimes. So, but yeah, no like real out and about type gigs or rehearsals or anything because it was honestly a little scary to be left home alone, because I wasn't
Oh,
sure like what would happen or if I was going to be okay. They were still worried about a seizure risk, and yeah, so
I
it
mean,
was,
that
it
kind of
was,
surgery just sounds scary from the get-go.
yeah, it
I,
was,
I
it
am
was.
glad everything turned out fortuitous.
Yes.
And
Well, thank you.
so you came back, and instead of getting involved again in Rainbow Cafe, which I think has a new board, you
Mhm.
decided to throw your hat in another ring.
Yes. So I am still involved with Rainbow Cafe a little bit. I still talk with them and things like that. And I know what's going on and things. But I also was kind of ready for something different. So I recently, as I think it started, like the process started in May. started the interview process and the application process to be on the board of Equality Illinois, which is a statewide organization for LGBTQ advocacy and things, primarily in Illinois. They don't do much national advocacy yet, but of course they're main players, you know. And so I officially started my tenure on July 1st. Super excited for that chapter of work. The new CEO of Equality Illinois is a Black trans woman that is just amazing, Shannon Lynn Parker. She is, you know, she's very insightful and she has just great ideas, and she's not scared to be out and about and be, you know, the face of Equality Illinois. So grateful for that leadership within the organization. So I went to the Pride Parade in Chicago last weekend, or whatever the 28th was. So not like this recent weekend, because this was the 4th, but the weekend before. And, you know, she was there, and, you know, Governor Pritzker signed a few bills, and basically the bills he signed were definitely for transgender healthcare and things. So Illinois is at the forefront, you know, of taking care of our trans siblings and making it a safe place. So I can say I know a lot of people that have moved here specifically for this purpose, to be in the safe space. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who've moved here as well for safety reasons and
Yeah,
for access to healthcare and stuff.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Equality Illinois' mission, it's effectively like Rainbow Cafe, but on a much larger scale.
Yes, and they're also a 501(c)(4), which makes them
Okay.
like a political, more political power. They also have the institution, the institute, the Equality Illinois Institute, which is like their 501(c)(3) arm. However, most of their work is a 501(c)(4), you know, doing the advocacy, doing endorsements of candidates, whether for the state senate or for this, you know, anywhere in the state legislature, or even city endorsements. You know, I know Claire Kilman was, you know, officially endorsed by Equality Illinois when she ran for city council a few years ago. So those kinds of things definitely, you know, are things that Equality Illinois does.
Good. Yeah, a lot of people don't know the difference between a C3 and a C4.
Sure. So a C3 is a nonprofit organization where things are tax exempt and they're not allowed necessarily to endorse specific candidates or be partisan or anything like that. They can't say they're Democratic, or they can't say they're Republican. They can't say, you know, they can't have any official political stance regarding parties or candidates. Now, a 501(c)(3) can do advocacy for their special interest populations, such as Rainbow Cafe doing a lot of advocacy for the LGBTQ community and things like that. However, you know, they still can't really say, oh, Rainbow Cafe endorses Judge so and so, or, you know, anything like that, because that would mean that they could take away their 501(c)(3) status. And one of the important things about a 501(c)(3) status is things are tax exempt. Like that's how donors can donate a large amount and then it's a tax write-off, and those kinds of things. A lot of grants, especially state and federal grants, you have to be a federally recognized 501(c)(3) to be able to write for those grants, to be able to get those grants, those kinds of things. Whereas 501(c)(4)s, which are very political and have that capability, they can get private funding from people, but they're not as likely to get any kind of grants. They're still considered a nonprofit, meaning they don't make any income for stakeholders, or I mean shareholders or anything like that, or the owners or anything like that. And they have a board, they have an operating board. However, they're more political in nature.
As a board member of the Transgender American Veterans Association, we've had a lot of issues because people are like, you're a 501(c)(3. Why are you not writing editorials yelling at these people? And we're like, because we're a C3, not a C4. And so we've
Exactly.
honestly, lately, we've done more education about nonprofits' existence and how they work than we've done
Hmm.
anything else. Because, trying to deal with an administration that has no interest in talking to you is
Exactly.
frustrating.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it must be with Equality Illinois, it must be a lot less stress since, well, the governor will talk to you and
Oh,
all these other
yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Governor Pritzker is like our cheerleader. We love him. And same with Juliana Stratton. She's doing great work too. Hopefully, our next senator, for Illinois.
Which would be
So,
great.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So definitely, they're big people that are very supportive of Equality Illinois as an organization. So, yeah.
Does Equality Illinois back individual candidates at the national level, like senators and how representatives?
I'm trying to think, Heather. I'm Yes, they do, I believe, like especially if they're like coming from Illinois. I believe so. I'm going to have to check. That's a good question because I'm going to have to check because I know like a lot of our work is definitely state level, keeping Illinois safe. And I'm pretty sure they do like, support anyone running for like US Senate, like Juliana Stratton, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure she is Equality Illinois endorsed. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about Juliet Fortier,
Hmm.
who's running for the local representative seat. So I'm
Sure.
wondering if she would, qualify under that. But I don't know because I don't know a lot of her stances.
Right. I know that's a big thing that Equality Illinois really does is they really vet and make sure that they are, lining up with what our values are and what Equality Illinois' values are in our stances and things and our mission specifically. But I could imagine she is. So that would be something definitely to talk to the board about, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
part of the reason I'm there. I feel like I'm very excited too to bring more Southern Illinois to a statewide organization. That's, I think, part of the reason also I was selected for the board was to bring more Southern Illinois and bring more representation from down here up there. It's been pretty much a Chicago-based organization for quite some time. About 10 years ago, like we started doing more things with Equality Illinois. Rainbow Cafe started doing more things with Equality Illinois. And then it kind of just grew from there. So, yeah, it's been great.
Hey, so it's not like you didn't have a background working with them.
Correct. Right. So Equality Illinois also has what they call a statewide network, and Rainbow Cafe has been part of their statewide network for probably 8 years. I want to say 2018, something like that, where they have representatives within the community, especially organizations that they help and they do a lot of the advocacy work. And Rainbow Cafe has always been that organization here in Southern Illinois. So when I was the executive director, and when before I even was chosen as the executive director, but when I was the vice president of the board and community relations person and stuff, I was the contact person for Equality Illinois for their statewide network. It's a pretty cool group, like networking wise. There's organizations all over the state that are a part of the statewide network. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
It sounds like you'll be able to have a much larger impact on the state rather than just local and regional stuff.
Yes, that is my hope. That is my hope to have more impact and also like bring Southern Illinois more to the table as far as what else is needed. Because we know that rural issues and rural barriers to care or whatever are vastly different than those in Chicago or even Springfield or even Peoria or even Champaign, like even when you talk just about like HIV care, the Ryan White program here in Southern Illinois covers 19 states, which is outrageous if you think about how wide that coverage is.
And how
So just
different it would
as
be with
example,
the integrating with the different states.
exactly, exactly, yeah. So just an example of the ruralness of Southern Illinois versus, Chicago metro area or even the suburbs. So yeah, I think we're a unique area where we're welcoming and open and have healthcare for our trans siblings, reproductive healthcare, thanks to, Planned Parenthood and Choices here, which is
Yeah.
great, and Alamo for reproductive care. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
It's great the opportunities that exist in this area because, when you look at a political map, all you see is this little blue dot.
right. You see a little blue dot for Jackson County, and then you see a little blue dot for Cairo, and that's about it,
Yeah,
but
yeah. And the thing
Mhm.
is, a lot of it is just getting the information out there
Right.
because too many people seem to be of the opinion that, well, if we don't see them all the time, they must not, be there. And I'm like, no, there are gay people with tractors.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Some of our work that we've done with Golden Rainbows of Illinois South, which is the elders group, that's one of the major things that we've seen is just isolation and trying to get people social events and also getting just transportation to just doctor's appointments, like I mean, yes, if someone is on Medicaid, they can get transportation, but it takes like a doctorate degree to get your Medicaid transportation lined up. I swear,
yeah, the
it's a
VA
lot.
is only moderately better. Moderate.
Right, right, right,
Yeah, it's just.
right.
Well, I'm very glad someone is bringing up important issues for the region up to
Hmm.
a larger organization that can help. Because,
Right,
I mean, we're getting to the point where a number of the elders could, might be moving into homes and facilities where they need to be taken care of. And what do we have going for that? What
right.
rights do the elders have going into those facilities? And
Right. Now, Billy Rogers with Golden Rainbows has been doing a lot of work with the LGBTQ long-term care Bill of Rights. And so they are working on that. That is a piece of legislature that did not pass through with this session, but they're still working on it, where they've added LGBTQ people and also those living with HIV or aging with HIV to the Bill of Rights for long-term care. So that's super important. Billy's been working really hard on that. I'm really proud to be part of Golden Rainbows and have that representation because definitely it is something that a lot of elders are concerned about moving into homes and having to go back into the closet or having to detransition for their safety. Crazy stuff like that, Heather, that you're just like, this is not how it should be for our
no,
queer
no, it
elders.
shouldn't. And I mean,
Hmm.
if I ended up having to go into one, I certainly wouldn't detransition regardless, because I'd just be like, are you kidding me?
Right, right, right.
And so,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay, well, thank you very much for this chat. It's been really helpful to catch up with you. And
Yeah, it's been great.
looking forward to all the great work you're going to be doing with Equality Illinois.
Awesome. Yes. And I'm going to do a quick little plug because on July 18th, we are doing a CRAP, which is Community Restroom Access Project. And we're doing it it's called the Restroom Rally. We're doing it in conjunction with AIDS Foundation Chicago Pride Action Tank, where we're going to go and celebrate gender neutral restrooms and bring the fact that like restroom access is such an issue for trans people sometimes and just kind of bring attention to that. And that's going to be from 11 to 2 on the 18th at Lost Forest Coffeehouse and Pub. We're going to have an open mic and all sorts of fun things.
Sounds awesome.
Mhm. So
Possibly see you there. Who knows?
awesome. Yeah, that's great. That'd be great. We'd love to see you. I know Ditto is involved with it, helping us out, getting the word out. Rainbow Cafe, Golden Rainbows. We have quite a few little groups going out. So yeah.
Right. Well,
All
you
right.
take care, and we'll talk to you later at your next
Okay.
big adventure.
Right. Absolutely. Hopefully it won't be as crazy as the last year has been. So definitely be in touch. All right. Thank you so much, Heather. Have a good one. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carrie, for the wonderful interview. The event that Carrie's talking about there at the very end of the interview is coming up this weekend on the 18th, July 18th from 11 to 3 p.m. This is the Pride Action Tank, a project of the AIDS Foundation Chicago and organizer of the Community Restroom Access Project. Yes, the acronym for CRAP. And Rainbow Cafe are collaborating to present the 2026 Restroom Rally. It'll take place in 2 locations, the Hideout, located in Chicago, Illinois, and the Lost Forest Coffeehouse and Pub, located in Carbondale, Illinois. This is again this Saturday, June 18th, 2026, from 11 to 3 p.m., and it is to convene community members, advocates, and allies to raise awareness of the importance of the Illinois Equitable Restrooms Act, ERA, a law meant to protect and enhance bathroom access for all Illinoisans. See, since 2020, the ERA has mandated that all single occupancy bathrooms be designated all gender, and as of 2023, allows multi-stalled all gender bathrooms, one of the first states to pass these provisions. So CRAP advocated for the passage of these amendments and seeks to raise awareness of their importance at a time when bathroom access is being restricted on a national level. The 2026 Restroom Rally aims to unite CRAP members, advocates, and the public and allies to highlight the continued importance of safe and inclusive restroom facilities in public areas. Organizers of the Restroom Rally encourage all members of the community across identity, age, family, or disability status, and their other lived experiences to come to the joint events, learn more about the ERA, support implementation efforts, and advocate for inclusive restroom policies in their own spaces and communities. Pride Action Tank will continue hosting educational events, community discussions, and policy briefings throughout the year following the rally to maintain energy around this issue. I think that is an amazing event. Yes, the acronym is a bit fun to say, and I think they know what they're doing there with that. And more power to you for being clever and allowing us the opportunity to drop that word as we share what is something that should be part of every human right. Access to facilities, regardless of your gender, regardless of your past, regardless of how you identify. You should have access to that. It shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't be a location of trauma or catastrophe or disaster. Well, I think that today's episode has been about the traumas and challenges we face, whether it's floods, whether it's allegations, whether it's using agencies to assault. And it's about surviving your own health issues, traumatizing and terrifying as they are, and not letting them stop you. Be the advocate that you are for the community. And very much thank you to Carrie Vine for that, and to Heather for securing that interview with her. And on that note, you've been listening to Isn't It Queer on WDBX 91.1, community radio serving the Southern Illinois region. This has been Jonny. Think Again Please is coming up next, and we will see you again next week on the radio.